the reason I call it blue-collar enlightenment is that there is indeed a light at the end of the tunnel. There is indeed an extraordinary quality to humanity to be discovered. And on the other hand, there's an utter ordinariness to it, and there's an utter quality of blue collar that does not make life totally okay, that does not get rid of your mind, that does not require that you have ego death and are living in an impersonal state. I'm not living in an impersonal state. I'm married, I have a kid, I have to work to make a living, I get frustrated, I get angry, I have all the regular emotions. There is no, I don't believe in strictly living the impersonal. It's bullshit. There is a inclusiveness that it's the law that I don't know how you can escape it, you know. And this article that I read this morning was just great. It's written by Jeff Foster. Anybody here ever heard of Jeff Foster? He's British. Yeah, he's great. He's a young guy. And maybe I'll even share some of this actually, because it's good. It's good satsang material. And also in light of my, you know, and this, I wrote this email recently, yeah, it's a bit. I've always this title of this article is "The Birth and Death of Fundamentalism in Non-Duality and Advaita Teachings."
Oh, great.
All right.
So there is I love Advaita Vedanta. There's no doubt about it. But I've also, and I see it very clearly, there's a fundamentalist quality to it. And I've seen it here in Charlottesville. And I think just recently, as cautiously and as quietly and as demurely as I possibly could, you know, I kind of brought that to the surface, you know, in this group. And stirred up a hornet's nest, probably. But yeah, in other words, and I'll read this for you. There's a messiness to life that is unescapable. At the same time, there's also a beautiful truth that we all have arisen from. And have access to, and is our birthright. However, that's not the exclusive truth. Consciousness is not the exclusive truth. If God wanted to have this strange dream, then why not fully embrace this strange dream with all of its ups and downs and problems? So I'll read this. This is a great article. So he starts off, "A few months ago I made this announcement. I am officially no longer an Advaita teacher or non-duality teacher, if indeed I ever was one. Life cannot be put into words, and however beautiful the words of Advaita non-duality are, they must be discarded in the end. I could never claim to be any sort of authority on this stuff. I will continue to speak, to sing my song to those who are open to listening, but gone is the need to adhere to any tradition, to use Advaita speak to avoid real, authentic human engagement, to pretend that I am in any way more or less special than you, to kid you that I know more than you, to play the teacher by refusing to meet you in the play, to stop listening to you because I see you as still stuck in the dream or still a person. This message is about love, in the true sense of the word. Otherwise, it is simply nihilism masquerading as freedom. The Advaita police reply, 'Who cares?' I say, 'I do, I do.'" God, when I read that first paragraph, I just went, yes! I just was like, yes! It was so beautiful to hear that, you know. So I'll read some more here. "If you listen to certain non-duality Advaita teachers who are on the scene at the moment, you may get the impression that there is something terribly wrong with having a personal story. Having a thought-created story about yourself, your past experience, your relationships, your feelings, your desires and hopes and fears, and so on. In other words, being a living, breathing human being is a clear sign of delusion and duality, and you need to wake up from that mess. If you go to a public meeting held by a teacher of radical Advaita, and they invite questions, and you start talking about something personal, for example, the death of a loved one, an addiction you have, a painful event, they will tell you that you are stuck in your story, or lost in the dream of time and space, or they will simply say you are still a person and haven't woken up. The fact that you told a story shows that you are still coming from duality, still identified as a seeker. Once you get it, you will no longer tell personal stories. You will exist in the eternal now and know nothing of your past. These teachers, of course, no longer tell stories. Well, except the gigantic story that all stories are a sign of ignorance. Yeah. They imply that they themselves exist in some sort of mystical state beyond the personal, or that they have entered into a kind of space where the personal no longer has any meaning, relevance, interest. They don't have a past or future. They don't have personal relationships. Who is there to have a relationship with? And they certainly never suffer, because all suffering is an illusion, right? And so you end up feeling inferior to these people, or non-people, or nobodies, or whatever they are calling themselves today, and terribly guilty and narcissistic for still having interest in your personal story. Liberation or enlightenment obviously hasn't happened for you yet, and so you wait and you wait for liberation to happen. And although these teachers say there is nothing you can do to reach liberation, and nobody there who can do anything anyway, you carry on going to their meetings and reading their books in the vain hope that it will happen one day. Although there's no you it can happen to, and no one day. What a headache! And for these teachers, your headache is yet a further sign that you don't get it yet. Their teaching is 100% true, pure, and uncompromisingly brutally honest. Your confusion is your problem, a sign of your ignorance. The burden of guilt is on you. Although these teachers talk about freedom, the wonder of existence and the completeness of all things, in their denial or rejection of the personal, they are sending a clear message to the seeker: keep seeking, for one day the personal will fall away. The seeker is kept hooked on the promise of a future impersonal state or experience, although of course the teacher denies that they have any sort of agenda or are promising anything to the seeker. In radical Advaita, the impersonal is better, or more real, or less illusory than the personal. Although, of course, it also is claimed that all hierarchies are illusions. Radical Advaita is a subtle form of seeking. No doubt about it. Give me 1 second. I'm going to read one more paragraph and see which one I want to read here. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying these teachers are bad or wrong, or that they intentionally set out to mislead people. Nothing of the sort. I'm saying that I no longer resonate with this way of expressing truth, that's all. I used to hold radical Advaita meetings myself, and would often dismiss personal stories in the same way as I'm describing above. And so I totally understand where this form of expression is coming from. I used to love this radical, uncompromising approach, until I saw through its root assumptions and its hidden agendas. It took me a long time, and much soul-searching and humility, to realize that in fact the impersonal and the personal are one. And this anti-personal stance is simply a personal preference of certain spiritual teachers. There is no such thing as an impersonal message. There are only people who act in impersonal ways towards the others. There are impersonal personalities, but no impersonal messages. What many of these teachers call impersonal truth is actually their own anti-personal stance, disguised as objective fact. So the article goes on. I won't read any more of it. But Jeff Foster.
It'd be fun if you could forward it
I was
to
going to
me.
say, could you send a link?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I'd be happy
I'd love read it.
to forward it to everybody. So Jeff Foster, if you don't know who he is, he's a British teacher, and he's very well known. He's just Google him, you will see YouTube and the internet, and he's been around for at least a decade that I know of, if not more. So I really resonate with that, and this is also what I resonate with the group that I mentioned earlier, Waking Down. need you say any more. That implies that we're not waking up to some impersonal state. Although and I know that Jeff Foster would agree with this, there is absolutely an embrace of consciousness as the impersonal. When I spoke of being tethered to a ground of consciousness, yes, indeed, there is it's a clear field of emptiness that is impersonal, that I'm very much in touch with at all times. And at the same time, I'm also in touch with this excruciating vehicle called the human body. And all of its emotions, and all the thought patterns that come and go in it. So this is what I call blue-collar enlightenment, is this beautiful marriage and acceptance of both. So I think that's what I wanted to talk about tonight. Would anyone like to share?
Well, I'd like to comment on what you wrote.